You know that moment at 3 in the morning when your brain decides to replay that embarrassing thing you said 5 years ago? Or when you're trying to focus on work but your mind keeps pulling you back to that argument you had last week, replaying it over and over like a broken record? Yeah, that's not just you being weird. That's your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. And today, we're going to figure out why it happens and, more importantly, how to make it stop. Let me tell you something that might blow your mind. Your brain repeats painful thoughts not because it hates you, but because it thinks it's protecting you. I know, sounds crazy, right? But think about it this way. Imagine you're living thousands of years ago, and you nearly got eaten by a tiger near a certain watering hole. Your brain's job is to make damn sure you remember that, so it replays that scary moment over and over until the lesson sticks. Don't go to that watering hole. Tigers are bad. Got it. The problem is, we're not running from tigers anymore. We're sitting in our apartments, scrolling through our phones, trying to live our lives. But our brains, they haven't gotten the memo. That same mechanism that kept our ancestors alive is now making us replay that time we said something awkward at a party, or when our boss gave us critical feedback, or when someone we loved walked away. The brain treats social pain and rejection the same way it treats physical danger. It wants you to remember, to learn, to never let it happen again. So here's what's actually happening in your head when you can't stop thinking about something painful. Your brain has this thing called the default mode network. It's basically the autopilot system that kicks in when you're not focused on something specific. When you're taking a shower, washing dishes, or lying in bed trying to sleep, that's when the default mode network takes over. And guess what it loves to do? Ruminate. It loves to chew on problems, especially unresolved ones. The thing about painful memories and negative thoughts is that they're sticky. They have what psychologists call emotional salience. That's just a fancy way of saying they grab your attention more than neutral or positive stuff. If 9 people compliment you and 1 person criticizes you, which one do you remember on the drive home? Exactly, the criticism, every single time. That's not because you're broken or negative, that's just how human brains work. We're wired to pay more attention to threats and negative information, because again, that whole survival thing. Now, let's talk about why some thoughts get stuck on repeat more than others. Have you ever noticed that the thoughts that haunt you the most are usually the ones where you felt powerless, or where something was left unresolved, or where you feel like you made a mistake you can't fix? There's a reason for that. Your brain desperately wants closure. It wants to solve the problem, fix the mistake, and win the argument you already lost. So it keeps bringing you back to that moment, hoping that this time you'll figure out the magic words that would have made everything different. But here's the cruel joke. You can't change the past. No matter how many times you replay that conversation, you can't go back and say the right thing. No matter how many times you imagine different scenarios, the thing has already happened. Your brain is trying to solve a puzzle that has no solution, which is why it never stops trying. It's like trying to find your keys by checking the same drawer 50 times. They're not there, but somehow you keep looking anyway. The repetitive thinking also creates what's called a negativity loop. Every time you think the painful thought, it triggers negative emotions. Those negative emotions make you more likely to have more negative thoughts. Those thoughts trigger more negative emotions. Around and around it goes. It's like being stuck in quicksand where every struggle just pulls you deeper. And the more you try to push the thoughts away, the stronger they come back. That's called the rebound effect. Tell yourself not to think about a white bear, and suddenly that's all you can think about. So what's actually going on in your brain during all of this? When you ruminate on painful thoughts, you're activating your amygdala, which is basically your brain's alarm system. It's the part that screams, "Danger, danger, danger." At the same time, you're deactivating your prefrontal cortex, which is the rational part that can actually solve problems and put things in perspective. So you're stuck in high alert mode without access to the tools you need to calm down or think clearly. It's like trying to navigate through a storm with no compass. There's also something called neural pathways. Think of them like trails in a forest. The more you walk the same path, the easier and clearer it becomes to walk. The same thing happens with thoughts. Every time you think a particular thought pattern, you're strengthening that neural pathway. So if you spend years replaying painful memories and catastrophizing about the future, you're basically building a superhighway for negative thoughts. Your brain learns to default to that pattern because it's the path of least resistance. The really messed up part? Sometimes we get addicted to these painful thoughts. I know, that sounds insane, but hear me out. When you ruminate, you get a hit of cortisol and adrenaline. Your body goes into stress mode, and weirdly, that can become familiar, almost comfortable in its own twisted way. It's like your brain saying, well, at least I know what this feeling is. At least I'm doing something, even if that something is just torturing myself with thoughts. It gives you the illusion of control. If I just think about it enough, I'll figure it out. But you won't. You're just stuck. Another reason painful thoughts repeat is because of what psychologists call cognitive fusion. That's when you become so entangled with your thoughts that you can't separate yourself from them. Instead of thinking, I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough, you just think, I'm not good enough, and you believe it completely. The thought becomes your reality. You don't see it as just a thought anymore. You see it as the truth. And when you believe your negative thoughts are facts, of course they're going to keep showing up. Why wouldn't they? They're true, right? Except they're not. They're just thoughts. Now, let's talk about trauma, because this is where things get even heavier. If you've experienced something traumatic, your brain's response is even more intense. Traumatic memories get stored differently from normal memories. They're fragmented, emotionally charged, and they don't get processed properly. So instead of being filed away as something that happened in the past, they stay active. They feel present. That's why people with PTSD can feel like they're reliving their trauma even years later. The brain hasn't marked it as over. It's still trying to protect you from a danger that's no longer there. But even if you haven't experienced capital T trauma, you can still have these sticky, painful thoughts from smaller experiences. Maybe you grew up with criticism, and now you can't stop replaying moments when you feel judged. Maybe you experienced rejection, and now your brain is hypervigilant for any sign that someone might leave you. These patterns get formed early, and they stick around because they were adaptive at some point. They helped you survive your environment. The problem is, you're not in that environment anymore, but your brain hasn't updated its software. Okay, so that's the why. Your brain repeats painful thoughts because it thinks it's protecting you, because negative information is stickier, because you're stuck in a loop with no resolution, because you've built neural pathways that make it automatic, and sometimes those thoughts feel familiar even when they're painful. Now comes the part you actually care about. How do you make it stop? First thing, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, you need to stop fighting the thoughts. I know, you want them gone, but remember that rebound effect? The more you try to suppress a thought, the more it comes back. Instead, you need to acknowledge it. When that painful thought shows up, instead of saying, no, go away, not again, try saying, oh, there's that thought again. I see you. You're not agreeing with it, you're not believing it, you're just noticing it like you'd notice a car driving by. It's there, and then it passes. This is where mindfulness comes in, and before you roll your eyes, just stay with me. Mindfulness isn't about emptying your mind or achieving some Zen state. It's about changing your relationship with your thoughts. Instead of being inside the thought, drowning in it, you step back and observe it. You create space between you and the thought. You realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the person who's aware of the thoughts. That might sound like philosophical nonsense, but it's actually incredibly powerful. Once you realize you can watch your thoughts instead of being consumed by them, everything changes. One technique that works really well is called cognitive defusion. Remember how I mentioned cognitive fusion earlier, where you get tangled up with your thoughts? Defusion is the opposite. It's about creating distance. Here's a simple way to do it. When you have a painful thought like, "I'm such a failure," instead try thinking, "I'm having the thought that I'm a failure." See the difference? In the first version, it's a fact. In the second version, it's just a thought. You can even go further and say, "I notice I'm having the thought that I'm a failure." Now you're really creating distance. It's not even your thought anymore. It's just a thought you're noticing. Another powerful technique is to name the story. Our painful thoughts often come in packages, like a whole narrative. Maybe yours is the "I'm not good enough" story, or the "everyone leaves me" story, or the "I always mess things up" story. When you notice yourself going down that path, just name it. Oh, there's the "I'm not good enough" story again. Hey, it's the "everyone leaves me" story making an appearance. This sounds silly, but it works because it helps you see the pattern. Once you see it as a recurring story rather than the truth, it loses some of its power. You also need to interrupt the rumination cycle physically. Your brain and body are connected, and when you're stuck in a thought loop, your body is usually stuck too. You're probably tensed up, breathing shallow, maybe hunched over. You need to break that physical pattern. Stand up, move, go for a walk, do jumping jacks. I'm serious. Physical movement interrupts the neural pattern. It's hard to ruminate intensely when you're moving your body. The rhythm of walking, especially, can be incredibly calming and can help shift your mental state. Breathing is another tool that sounds too simple to work, but absolutely does. When you're ruminating, you're in fight or flight mode. Your sympathetic nervous system is activated. To calm down, you need to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and one of the fastest ways to do that is through breathing. Try this. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts. Repeat that a few times. It sends a signal to your brain that you're safe, that there's no emergency, and it can calm down. Here's something else that's crucial. You need to redirect your attention intentionally. Your brain is going to default to those painful thoughts because that's the superhighway you've built. To change that, you need to deliberately focus on something else, not to suppress the thought, but to give your brain a different path to follow. This is where engaging activities come in, something that requires your full attention. It could be cooking a complex recipe, playing an instrument, doing a puzzle, or having a real conversation with someone. The key is that it needs to be engaging enough that your brain can't ruminate at the same time. A lot of people find that writing helps too. There's something about getting the thoughts out of your head and onto paper that releases their grip. You're not just spinning them around in your mind anymore. You're externalizing them. You can see them. Sometimes when you read back what you wrote, you realize how distorted or exaggerated the thoughts are. Other times, writing helps you process and find closure that your brain was desperately seeking. You don't have to write anything profound. Just dump it out. Stream of consciousness. Let it be messy. Now let's talk about challenging the thoughts. Once you've created some distance and you're not completely fused with them, you can start questioning them. Is this thought actually true? What evidence do I have for it? What evidence do I have against it? If my best friend had this thought about themselves, what would I tell them? Often we're way harsher on ourselves than we'd ever be on someone we care about. You need to become your own friend here. Talk to yourself with the same compassion you'd show someone you love. You also need to understand that closure doesn't always come from figuring out the past. Sometimes the closure comes from accepting that you can't change it and deciding to move forward anyway. This is hard, really hard, because your brain wants answers. It wants to understand why that person hurt you, why that thing happened, and what you could have done differently. But sometimes there are no satisfying answers. Sometimes people hurt you for reasons that have nothing to do with you. Sometimes bad things just happen. The closure comes from accepting the uncertainty and choosing to let it go anyway. Compassion is huge here. You need to be gentle with yourself about the fact that you're struggling with these thoughts. Beating yourself up for ruminating just adds another layer of painful thoughts. Oh great, now I'm ruminating about the fact that I'm ruminating. Don't do that. Instead, recognize that you're human, that your brain is doing what human brains do, and that it's okay to struggle. Self-compassion isn't about letting yourself off the hook, it's about treating yourself with the same kindness you'd show anyone else who's going through a hard time. There's also something to be said for finding meaning in your pain. This doesn't mean pretending it was good or that you're grateful it happened, but sometimes when we can find some way that our painful experiences have shaped us, taught us something, or made us more empathetic, it helps us integrate the experience instead of just being tormented by it. It moves from this terrible thing that happened to me into this difficult thing I went through that's now part of my story. That shift can be powerful. And look, sometimes you need professional help, and there's zero shame in that. If your painful thoughts are significantly impacting your life, if you're dealing with trauma, if you've tried these techniques and you're still stuck, therapy can be incredibly helpful. A good therapist can help you work through the underlying issues, teach you more techniques, and provide support while you're doing this hard work. Cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR for trauma, acceptance and commitment therapy, these are all evidence-based approaches that can help break the cycle of repetitive painful thoughts. One more thing I want to mention is the importance of building a life that pulls you forward. When you're stuck in painful thoughts about the past, it's often because you don't have enough compelling things in your present and future. You need goals, projects, relationships, and activities that engage you and give you reasons to be present. It's hard to ruminate about the past when you're actively building something you care about. This isn't about distracting yourself from your pain. It's about creating a life that's rich enough that your brain has other things to focus on besides old wounds. So, here's what I want you to remember. Your mind repeats painful thoughts because it's trying to protect you, but you can teach it a new way. You can create distance from your thoughts, interrupt the patterns, redirect your attention, challenge the narratives, and treat yourself with compassion through the process. It takes practice, a lot of practice. Those neural pathways didn't form overnight, and they won't change overnight either. But every time you catch yourself ruminating and choose to respond differently, you're weakening that old pathway and building a new one. The thoughts might not disappear completely, and that's okay. They might still show up sometimes, but they'll have less power. They'll be easier to let go of. You'll spend less time stuck in them, and gradually you'll find that your mind is a more peaceful place to be. You'll get better at being present. You'll stop losing hours to rumination. You'll sleep better. You'll have more energy for the things that actually matter. That's what's on the other side of this work. Now, I want to hear from you. What's the painful thought pattern you struggle with most? Is it replaying past mistakes, worrying about what others think, or something else entirely? Please drop a comment and let me know. And if you found something that works for you in breaking these cycles, share it. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Here's the truth I want you to take away today. You are not your thoughts. Your painful thoughts don't define you. They're just thoughts, and thoughts can change. You have more power over your mind than you realize. It might not feel like it right now when you're stuck in that loop at 3 in the morning, but you do. And every small step you take toward changing your relationship with your thoughts is a victory. Every time you catch yourself ruminating and choose to respond differently, you're weakening that old pathway and building a new one. And that's worth celebrating. If this video helped you understand why your mind works this way and gave you some tools to work with it differently, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps more people find this content when they need it. And subscribe to the channel because we're going to keep diving into the messy, complicated, fascinating reality of how our minds work and how we can work with them instead of against them. You're not alone in this struggle, and you don't have to figure it all out by yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.